I work with Black Diamond Wealth Platform. My name is Sean McAdams. I'm going to be focusing on the relatively recent Docusign integration stuff we do with our wealth management platform. Here's some little bit of information about us, but basically the Black Diamond Wealth Platform does wealth management for advisors, and oftentimes they need to interact with clients and send them documents that they need signature for legal verification to make sure they can, manage funds and manage accounts on behalf of their clients. Black Diamond originally created about 2005, has been around for a while, plenty of versions since then. Current version we have is we call BD3. You may hear me say that, but it's just Black Diamond 3, not a big deal. And it's kind of an evolving distributed system with multiple domains. We have probably about 300 running services and APIs, 20 teams. We have, you see on the slides, but about 50 developers and 400 employees that work on this particular platform. And we manage a reasonably large amount of funds. There's about 2 trillion in assets under management in the platform, and we deal with about 500,000 investors and somewhere around 60,000 advisors in the platform. So not maybe a pretty decent size system. It focus on the particular use case that we used Conductor heavily for, and that's Docusign. And the use case here was that advisors wanted to be able to start an electronic signature request, and they wanted users to be able to interact with that signature request within the platform and not just through a Docusign. And then at the end, we wanted to be able to download and archive that document for long-term legal usage. So some of the things we ran into as we were doing this is Docusign signatures can be open for 6 months. So that means we will have to have a workflow out in the wild running in Conductor for almost 6 months. And what does that mean? And that means a lot of potential problems. Services can down, deployments can go out, APIs can go under maintenance. Your OpenID Connect service goes down and you can't make polling requests to internal APIs anymore because you can't get access tokens. Like things, a lot of things happen in 6 months, and having something running and constantly doing work within that 6 months can be very intensive. And you might not even be able to do it. In particular with Docusign, there's limits on how many times you can hit their APIs and so forth. So we had to figure out ways of interacting with external systems like Docusign in a long-term view and receive information from them in not just a polling manner, which Conductor works really well in the polling sense, and they provide you, and we provide tools to do that, but you can extend it a little bit, and I'll kind of go into more detail about that and how to do that. But some of the challenges, like I said, documents can also be voided, declined, and abandoned. So they might not even have users interacting with the document at all. It might just be abandoned. Now you have a workflow that needs to be cleared out. Any sort of process, anything that was created during that time has to be removed. So you need cleanup processes, and you need ways of dealing with that. Also, so when you create, each person that needs a sign needs to have their own separate entity that you're effectively working with. And we manage, I'm going to go forward a little bit so this makes a little bit more context. We keep track of each individual recipient based off of a workflow. What's the status? Have they signed it? Did they reject it? Did they decline it? If they decline it, we need to notify the advisors that the request has been declined. And a lot of this information needs to be tracked. So we have to have separate workflows to manage each recipient. But then you can have as many recipients as Docusign allows, which is anywhere from 1 to 50. And so that whole process that is dynamic, and you need to be able to dynamically build sub processes as part of your entire orchestration field. So it gets to this, you run into this kind of view of workflows. And then Again, recipients can sign at different times. One person can sign tomorrow and the next person signs 4 months later. You still need to be able to track all that information. And one of the biggest features is they wanted to be fast. They wanted to say when a user signs a document, it needs to show in the app as soon as possible. Like you can't wait, a few minutes for the polling process to go get the information about the document and move on. So you need a way of preempting the process of running a task or running a individual API request. So we did that with enhancing the task execution process with events. So effectively, we have a kind of a wrapper around Conductor in Black Diamond that we are listening to events that are coming from both internal and external systems. And when those events are fired, they then feed into what we call the workflow system, and they can preempt a task, and they can actually run a task without waiting for Conductor to schedule it. And Conductor works really well in this manner because all really Conductor does to schedule a task is right. It sees when the next callback is, puts it in the queue, picks it up, and you go on. But when polling for Docusign, you can't poll every 5 seconds. You can't poll every minute. You actually more likely can poll maybe once a day per recipient. Otherwise, you're going to start hitting API limits and API request failures. So you need to be able to say, okay, Docusign comes in and gives a webhook back into our system. It emits an event. The event goes into our workflow system and starts a task, and starts a task execution directly instead of waiting for the callback from Conductor directly. And we also have to figure out how to handle API outages. So if an API goes down in the period that we're polling or we're getting information, how do we prevent it from destroying the whole workflow? You need to utilize status codes pretty heavily of 403s and being able to identify the difference between a failed API call and a API call that can be retried more than once, twice, or 3 times, that you have to wait for some sort of recovery process. The other thing is that there's a lot of domains involved in this one workflow. So we have electronic signature request management, webhooks from external systems, what we call to-dos that give the users notify in-app that something they need to do, which is sign the signature request. There's client portals, document vaults. We have a lot of domains that interact with this, and you can't push that all into one worker, and you probably don't even want to. You really don't even want to. You want each of the individual domains to have control over their creating and managing their own entities. So when you go to create and manage electronic signature requests, you're going to create tasks that are within that signature request domain, and you're going to want to have a worker that services this task that's in your domain that you created for those signature requests. The same with something like our to-dos, which we call tasks, very overloaded term, tasks, but you want to isolate your Conductor workers based on domains, just like you would any other service based off domain, right? At least that's how we've feel it's been successful from a worker's perspective. And as I mentioned earlier, we heavily using sub workflows to simplify like sub branching concepts and being able to get status from that. Unfortunately, the current existing sub workflow process was a little bit too rigid for us. So we have a slightly different run sub workflow piece that can track outputs and can basically, you don't have to wait for the workflow. You won't have to wait for the sub workflow to complete technically for the process to move on, and a couple other kind of quality of life things around sub workflows that we kind of enhanced internally. I won't go over this again because I kind of explained it, but the main point is there's a bunch of domains involved with one single workflow, and in a very heavily distributed system, you don't want all that in one service. You need it split up, and it's going to provide a better architecture in the long run, and easier to reason about individual services if you do separate them well. So moving a little faster than I expected, but that's all right. I have a good time for demos and questions here soon. But this is effectively the workflows we use. I'm gonna do a demo of this, and you can see it running in Conductor directly. But basically, it's a process that keeps track of the overall signature request, and then these keep track of individual recipients' signature status. And so when they sign it, it'll go through completed and finished. And when these guys, when it's finally completed, it'll go through this whole process. And I will jump into a demo real quick, unless someone has questions we can quickly answer. Didn't see any questions.
I think you're good.
So let's go ahead and so this is part of the Black Diamond platform, and in here we have like a simple little link to start a Docusign request, and it pushes us into a wrapper around our workflows system. That this is kind of a slight wizard describing the things that a user can input data into for an individual workflow. So in here, this process, it reads from Docusign API, you can pull in existing templates. So here, this is a new account package. So if someone was onboarding a new client, they might have like predefined templates in Docusign that they want to use. You can just pick that, and then you pick based off of, we have user relationships. So we know what clients are associated with specific kind of portfolios here. And you're able to select kind of who you want to be involved in this process. I'm going to go pick this, and I'm making the main signer one of my contacts. So you'd be able to say, okay, this is how I want the Docusign. I want to create an internal task for this, and we can use some of the features here involved. It's not a real one, so I'm just going to fake. And then ultimately, you get to say, okay, where do I want to place the document once it's finished? And this is a really basic view of our Vault thing. We're still working on some UI tweaks, but you can pick where your folder is, and then ultimately you have a little summary. And then once you save this, this effectively saves the information associated with this workflow, and then you move through to Docusign. And so what this ends up doing is this actually, behind the scenes, it creates a record in our system that's waiting for a webhook from Docusign that says, hey, this signature is now, this signature request is now ready. Obviously, this is a fake document. But you could see that, it just pushes this data through to Docusign, and we can use it that way. Or it's just coming all through, and you'll see, but at this point, technically, it hasn't created a workflow because it comes back to the concept of that signature requests can be abandoned. So what if a user came in here and did a bunch of things, and they're like, oh, I didn't like this, and close this out? We can't have a running workflow that sits for 6 months, of this. We need to have something involved. So we rely a little bit more on the webhooks to trigger events that then start workflows. And while we have our own internal eventing system that starts workflows, I believe that Conductor actually supports starting workflows based off events too, if you have that process in place. But so now that we started that, as long as the demo, whatever you call demo DDs, like us, that we will get a webhook from Docusign that starts our signature request process, and it will start the entire system. Of course, as we expect it's probably going to be a pain. So let me just go to an old one. So fine. So here's an example of one I did at the demo before, and we'll go into, let's go to a good one. So this one, for instance, so we had, this was a single recipient. It goes through and creates the sub workflow. The sub workflow is stored. You can see the output information. You can get the internal workflow ID. So I can easily just go and go to the sub workflow, but you can kind of get that information. I believe it just worked anyways. So yeah, so sorry. Here's the demo example. We had 2 recipients, created 2 sub workflows. It's waiting for the signature response. And these are the 2 sub workflows created. So now, because I got an email that asked me to do a new account package, you can kind of see this as an example. So it sends a terrible email that's not formatted right, but let me kill this. And so we have our internal signature request process has sent out emails for the individual users. Of course, I don't remember the password, but you'll be able to, we'll be able to sign that, and it'll complete these workflows like this. So once the signature request gets into the status, one of these 3 statuses is what we're expecting. So if it's signed, it will be completed, but if it's voided or declined, we still want to transition, and then we make a decision to upload it into the vault, depending on if a user selected to upload it into our vault as a sub-process. So a little hectic there, but because the demo was annoying because I forgot my login for the client, but that's the general process. So there's a lot of human interaction here in that, you know, we're getting events that come from external system that are driven from user interaction by signing a request, and the user has to accept or has to request it anyways, or has to request the document to be signed. But you can see also these are the 2, like you create tasks. It auto creates these tasks in our system for the individual users to be able to see. And this will actually show up in their mobile app or in their client portal. They'll have a little notification that says, hey, you have a signature request involved. Click it, goes through, you sign it, we get the webhook, complete your task. And it's it's a pretty complex workflow. We've had a lot of really cool success in that it uses a lot of our internal domains and a lot of moving parts, and it all is orchestrated by Conductor. So it's really nice. I think that
is super cool.
I think, hold up, I have one last shameless plug. We're hiring, remote positions available. Cool. Just email me. All right, that's it.
Great. Well, that was awesome. That was super cool. We actually do have a few questions here. Let me just move Zoom to my closer screen because it's really a small font. First question is, do you use event handlers to complete the task? Do you use the Conductor event handlers at all?
No, we actually, so we have a internal RabbitMQ instance, and a lot of our services already are really built to work with RabbitMQ. So we opted to not use the internal event handlers, though I don't see any reason why you couldn't. I think the event handler should be able to trigger processes, if I'm not mistaken. I think the only thing that I wanted to do for this is we needed to store information on, like I needed to use information on the events to drive what tasks then get completed. So we have a callback into the system, it triggers an event, and there's a subscription to that event that has metadata associated with that subscription. And so when that event triggers that subscription, it fires off an action with that payload it has the information of what task created that subscription and how to resolve that subscription. So it's a little bit extra metadata.
Okay. Second question is from Sunil, and he's wondering, what's the persistent layer that you're using?
Right now, we're using the MySQL persistence. We're running on MariaDB for our MySQL instance. I store all the metadata associated with workflows in Mongo, though. So we don't use the MySQL instance as the permanent store. It's more of a temporary storage, I guess, of the last 6 months to a year of workflow data is roughly what we try to do.
Okay. Awesome. And the last question is, at least right now, the last question is from Alec. If something goes wrong, if there's no response from a human for days, as example, can the process owner restart the task, or is it automated with timeouts?
So if there's no response from a user, that's one of the main pain points. Is each signature request, again, can stay open for 6 months. If they decide they want to sign it on month 5, day 30, we have to be able to support that, which means that we have these things open for potentially 6 months at a time. There's no real retrying of the tasks because they don't complete unless they either time out, which is 6 months, or you're in the correct status. So I guess that would be no. If something goes wrong, the tasks effectively, not so much something goes wrong because we're including the possibility of no response as part of the workflow, but the tasks will not close themselves automatically if for some reason the conductor loses all context to executing tasks that will be left out.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Conductor or Docusign sends reminders like, hey, Doug, you haven't signed this recently. Don't you want to go there and do it? The sort of kick in the pants to keep people in the process.
We also have, for that to-do list stuff, we have the same process. We have a reminder. You can set a reminder schedule and you can set due dates that we remind the user to go ahead and do this.
Awesome. And we have there's 4 questions in the Q&A panel. So I'm just going to bounce around a little bit here. Is the wait for signatures task, is it a simple task or is it a wait task?
It is a simple task in this case because I implemented as part of that domain. So the one thing that, and it's just the way it is, 6 months in seconds happens to also kind of be a little outside the range of accepted in Conductor, if I'm not mistaken. So because I think we use I think there's I forget what it is we use, but there's a limit. So we effectively are storing the timeout and we're polling roughly once a day to say, okay, if we missed a webhook, because missing webhooks is possible for some reason, we poll once a day to get the latest status of an individual request. And if that's successful, then we also emit the same events because we're effectively running the same process, but it's a simple.
Are you using Kafka for handling the events? And how are you tracking the workflow executions?
Not using Kafka, we're using RabbitMQ though. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't use Rabbit. And for tracking workflow executions, let me actually reshare my screen because I think this is worth at least mentioning, is whenever, and this is part of the reason why I have a wrapper around the process, is whenever a workflow is requested to be started through our workflow system, I actually modify the workflow definition slightly and intercept the definition and shove these begin and end steps as part of the workflow. And so what this is actually doing is I have a system worker that's doing work for the general system that says when a workflow begins, it handles this task, records the information about who started it, where is it coming from, and I keep track of that. And then when it's done, I keep track of the system end. And it works the same for if you look at like terminate tasks. So if you have a terminate task, I have a process that intercepts terminations and records completion. And then I record that information in Mongo. And that's just a simple task that has context to the executing workflow.
Awesome. Do you use Elasticsearch? And then what version of Conductor are you using?
Yes, using Elasticsearch for the UI search process. We're using Conductor 3.0, Elasticsearch 7. Yeah. Last one.
Are the tasks to kick off the additional workflows sub-workflows, or are they simple tasks to perform a start workflow action?
They are simple tasks that start a sub-workflow action. So if I, again, share just for, I should have just left the share on, but it's a simple task that is the task of run sub-workflow. And I implement sub-workflow in a special way, specifically because of how I want to track the inputs and outputs of this. I'll be honest, I do not remember the limitation that with the existing run sub-workflow that I had to do this, but this is ultimately what we wanted to do. I think one of the main things I wanted is I didn't want it to block on the sub-workflow. I wanted it to continue doing the other work, and technically if this user doesn't sign it because he is actually a carbon copy or something, and the workflow and the signature request completes, I still want the upload process to work, and I don't want it to wait for every single sub workflow to complete.
So it actually, each one of those simple tasks is optional, I guess. So you don't have to, those sub workflows don't have to complete.
Yeah, and a matter of fact, if you were in the UI and say you're over here and didn't put anything in the task, if you didn't fill out this screen at all, it would never even run those workflows. Those sub workflows wouldn't even execute because there's nothing to create.
Awesome, that's cool. And then there's actually a couple more over in the Q&A. The sub workflows are created dynamically, or they already exist when you invoke them. Thanks, awesome work.
They are all dynamic. So there's a task that's part of it that kind of aggregates the data that comes from Docusign. So we have that Docusign webhooks in with this big XML payload. We pull out the recipients. I can use that to then derive how many recipients need to have tasks assigned to them. And that's done. Again, that part is in the signature request domain that effectively says, okay, I know how to split this up, and I know how many tasks I effectively need to create from that.
All right, and then there's at least two more right now. Shane asks, what are you using for temporary data storage? And the 6-month timeout is from the app or a limit of Conductor. And I think that you'll answer that one, but that's Docusign, right?
Yeah, 6 months, that is technically Docusign. That was their limit. And then I have just a custom process that waits, that can stay up for that long. And temporary data storage, that's, I mean, that right now is Maria. So we're using the MariaDB for, I mean, JSON storage is still just being stored in Maria right now.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got two, Anoop and Aravidon, both say that we have a new start workflow system that's in Conductor 3.6.1 that might be a replacement for your simple start workflow tasks.
That's great. the less I have to have is always great. I'll have to look
Yeah.
into it.
I can't wait to check those out either. I haven't. I saw those in the release notes and I haven't had a chance to take a look yet. Well, that was fabulous, and like a crazy amount of questions, which is amazing, and I'm so happy for that. That's great. Thank you again, Sean. I do appreciate taking the time to put together the presentation and sharing with us. And then, thank you to our attendees for all the great questions.